Thank you, JW. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I serve as a board member of HICA. I'm proud to do this introduction, and I want to say thank you to the staff for all that you do. Incredible work supporting Carlos and all the things he will talk about today, but also the board. So thank you for that. Normally, I look for interesting facts about something that's not on a bio, but Carlos's bio is pretty interesting. So I'll just walk through it. But before I do that, I will tell you as a board member what I love about what HICA does, and it does many different things. What I love is the community building and the business development that they do. My philosophy and the philosophy we support at Aleman Power Governmental Affairs is that we need to unlock the potential of all of our communities, particularly our marginalized communities. And HICA is absolutely doing that. So on to Carlos. First, Dr. Carlos Aleman. He's an immigrant from Nicaragua who was raised in San Francisco. He's got a BA in history and Latin American studies, as well as a PhD in history. Shortly before coming to his current role as CEO of HICA, he taught at Sanford in both history and Latin American studies. And in August of 2020, Carlos became the first Latino in the state of Alabama to be elected as a public official. He was elected to the City Council of Homewood, where he still serves. Carlos is a member of many national and local boards. I'll just mention a few that I think are particularly valuable. Not to say the others are not valuable. The Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, Rev. Birmingham, and Red Mountain Park. So he's going to talk about this a little bit today, but I think at all levels of organization and nonprofit work and in business, you need to be constantly changing and innovating and growing. HICA has an amazing foundation. The organization that Carlos took over was strong, but he has taken steps to improve the organization. One of the things he has done is hired a first data manager, recognizing the importance of data to support the work they do all across the state. He's also, and he will talk about this a little bit, but has formed a new partnership with PARCA to provide research and support for the data that they use at HICA to inform their operations. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carlos Aleman, the CEO of HICA.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me fine? Yes, great. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I see a lot of familiar and friendly faces. I mean, I have 3 current and former board members who are here on this table, so that's fantastic. If you want to join our board, let me know. We can work something out. Let me see. Where do I point this thing? No, there we go. So like Houston said, I was born in Nicaragua, so I want to contextualize what that means. I was born in 1979. That means my family migrated to the United States when Nicaragua was in a civil war, right? So in September of 1982, Contras come into Nicaragua and my family leaves. And so we left to come to San Francisco. That's where I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in a predominantly immigrant neighborhood in San Francisco. And we did that on a tourist visa. We're supposed to be here 90 days. It is now almost 40 years later. I still haven't finished looking at everything, but to say that, that means that from the age of 3 to 9, we were undocumented. Now, the last time that this country passed a pathway to citizenship for folks who were undocumented was under Ronald Reagan in 1986. That decision was transformative for my family because it created opportunities and pathways that unlocked our potential. I wouldn't be here in this room today if we hadn't been able to create pathways, to create opportunities for citizenship and education. And those are the critical factors that we need to consider when we talk about this larger immigration conversation, debate, dialogue, however you want to talk about it. I've been privileged and blessed enough to have opportunities that I do not take for granted, and oftentimes find myself as the only Latino in the room. And so that carries a certain level of responsibility that I take seriously, because I think that while my story may seem one that is exceptional, I find it oftentimes to be tragic because often I'm the only one in the room. Let's talk about Latinos. What does it mean? What do we call this community? Hispanic, Latin American, Latino, Latinx, Latine. These are different terms that try to encompass a community that is hard to define. Hispanic really comes out of the 1970s when the US government was trying to capture the community in a census, so focus on Spanish-speaking individuals. Hispanic has to do with language, with ties to Spain. Latino has to do more with geography, people who are coming from Latin America. So while they are at times interchangeable, they're not necessarily exactly the same. Someone who is from Spain is Hispanic but not Latino. Someone who is Brazilian is Latino but not Hispanic. Because in Brazil, you speak Portuguese, but you're still from Latin America. In Spain, you speak Spanish, but you weren't raised in Latin America. So there's an important historical perspective in terms of also the history of imperialism, the history of colonization, and the history of slavery and indigenous genocide that also has to do with the Latin American experience and US intervention since 1776. We also have to think about that most of the time, when I'm talking to my coworkers at HICA, I don't say I'm Latino. We're quick to say, I'm Nicaraguan, right? We have folks from Mexico. We have folks from Colombia, Puerto Rico. And we are quick to say, hey, we are the similar, but not the same. We share similar foods and words, but sometimes the conversation gets dicey when you say a word that in your country means something completely different than it means in mine. There's also differences in terms of ethnicity and race. There is no racial category that is Latino. We, like the United States, cover the spectrum, the racial gamut of folks who are mostly European, folks who are predominantly indigenous, folks who are predominantly Black, and then every single racial mixture they're in. And so that complicates how we talk about race in Latin America, but it also makes it much more fluid because we don't necessarily have the same binary that exists in the United States. And so those are things that also need to be taken into account. Class is a big important factor as to who gets to come and how are able to arrive here, as well as levels of education, language. Not everyone speaks Spanish. There's a lot of folks who are coming right now who speak predominantly indigenous languages. And then, of course, the question of status. A lot of folks like myself now are US citizens, but there's plenty of folks who are permanent residents, and a good portion of the population is undocumented. And so those create different barriers and opportunities depending on which category you fall into. What does this mean for Alabama? Well, the growth has been tremendous. In 1990, according to the US Census, there was 26,000 something Latinos in this state. In 2020, there's 266,000. That's a tenfold increase in a period of 30 years. That means that we've gone from less than 1% of the population to about 5.3% of the population. And that number is only going to grow. Now, before you think, wow, that's a lot of immigrants coming in, majority of the growth is actually through natural birth. So of course, we are having folks who are coming into our community from Latin America and from other states, but the predominant growth is due to the fact that our population has babies. And so we're seeing a lot of folks raising those kids in our communities, and we're seeing tremendous growth. But that also means that we have great opportunity. We're seeing that first batch of folks who came in the 1990s and 2000 have their kids, they're being raised here, they're going to our educational institution, they're graduating from our colleges and universities. And for us in this room, that means that you have now a broader talent pool to draw from that is bilingual, bicultural, and can help you better reach different sectors of the population. So what does this mean also? It also means that we're going to change how we define race in Alabama. Too often, I find that Latinos and immigrants in general are invisible. When you are working on your diversity efforts, you're not really talking about us. And I'll tell you, if you're not talking about Latinos and when you're talking about diversity, you're doing it wrong. Because we are now a multicultural, multi-ethnic community, and we need to broaden how we talk about race, because it is much more complicated and it's much more nuanced. And we also have to think about and take into account linguistic factors. And I'm just putting some quotes from folks who've talked about this. So why do people come? Well, wages, they're pretty good, right? And it's affordable to live here, if I'm honest, right? Like, I actually can buy a house. I grew up in San Francisco. I'm never moving back, y'all. And it's mostly because I can't afford it. So I think that folks, if you're looking for a place to have a community in which you can raise and have a backyard and you can still have those values that we share, then Alabama was very attractive. I like to point out the fact that the South has more in common with Latin America than it does New York. If you think about the fact that our reliance on family, our reliance on faith, and our shared love of pork These are the things that tie communities together. And so I think we have to think about what are the ties that bond us. And pork is a strong one. Shout out to our pig roast that's coming up on Saturday. Okay, so there's a lot of economic opportunities. And these are the industries that most of our community resides in. That's construction, poultry processing. There's, how many of you are familiar with Albertville? Now, that's an important community, but I'll say that Albertville, like many rural communities across state, would have died had it not been for the influx of Hispanic migrants. That Hispanic and immigrant communities have revived many rural communities across our state. If you go to Russellville today, we were just talking about this, you go down to their main street, the majority of those businesses on their main street are now Hispanic. Their K-12 is now 50% Latino. And so that's changing what we need to do in terms of addressing the needs of a broader, multiracial, multi-ethnic community. And of course, farm work, forestry, landscaping, service. And then, as evidenced by the folks that I have in front of me, a rising young professional class as well. We also want to dispel myths about what it means in terms of immigrants and their contributing power economically. We have, according to the New American Economy study, in 2018, immigrant spending power in Alabama was $3.7 billion. We contribute $944 million in federal taxes, $355 million in state and local taxes. And we also have an extremely entrepreneurial community. We have folks who are creating new jobs, new opportunities, and new industry. And the map on the right is where we're seeing a lot of that growth. A lot of it is actually happening in the north. So what are the challenges that our community faces? Well, language access is one of them, right? When COVID was a really great example of that, when those ordinances and protocols were coming out from the Alabama Department of Public Health, from Jefferson County, all of that was in English. And so HICA translated initially in those early weeks, all of that into Spanish so that our community knew what was happening and knew what they had to do to take care of themselves and their families. Immigration status, of course, is another barrier that currently exists. We passed the harshest immigrant law in the country in 2011 when it was under HB 56. There are remnants of that law that still exist, though HICA was the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit that sued the state to declare the harshest provisions unconstitutional. But there are still some aspects of it that remain in place. And then poverty. A lot of our community members live in conditions that are difficult to climb out of. They live in trailer parks and in very vulnerable dwellings, which means that as we're experiencing this sort of heat that we've felt this summer, they are the ones who are most vulnerable. When we have tornadoes, when we have floods, the climate impacts of living in poverty are great. So where does HICA come in? Well, HICA has been around for 24 years. We're celebrating 25 years next year. It was established in 1999 when a group of Hispanic leaders came together and said, there's a lot more of us now. We should probably do something about it. And so they decided to found an organization, and they elected Isabel Rubio to become the first executive director. And Isabel, really with a phone and a heart for it, just started creating information and referral services. Hey, how do I enroll my kids in school? How do I turn on the power? Where's the hospital? We were providing that sort of information. Since then, we have grown dramatically to create 5 programs that serve over 5,000 people every year. And that's a testament to the strength of the organization, but it's also a testament to the support we receive from this community. So we are a community development and advocacy organization that champions economic equality, civic engagement, and social justice for Latino and immigrant families here in Alabama. Now, let me tell y'all, in Alabama, I go to conferences nationwide, I tell them I'm doing this work here. They're like, how's it going? I'm like, pretty good. It's pretty good. We're doing well. Our vision is an Alabama in which everyone has full and equal participation in our state's civic, cultural, social, and economic life. Hispanic and immigrant families are empowered to integrate, engage, and lead their communities to reach their and their families' aspirations. We do this in a framework that we call immigrant inclusion, which is a two-way street in which immigrants are encouraged to learn how to navigate systems, learn English, go to college, enter the workforce, build assets, open businesses, and become civically engaged members of their communities, while also working with host communities to provide resources, Look, y'all, you can't ask people to learn English if you don't provide ESL classes. That's just a fact. We need to create welcoming environment by removing barriers and providing access to opportunities and resources as bilingual services, civics classes, naturalization, workforce development, educational scholarships, support for entrepreneurs, and protection for our most vulnerable immigrants. We do this through 5 programs, the first of which is Strong Families. That program that Isabel started has grown into this dynamic, incredible program that really serves as the gateway for what we do at HICA. We bridge community organizations with HICA. We have about 25 MOUs. So if we don't do something, we know who does. And we partner with them to make sure that our community is able to access resources. Bundles of Hope is a great example of that partnership in which we provide diaper products for our families and community. We also empower women in leadership development. We support individuals and families who are victims of crime. We're really proud of this work in particular, and the state of Alabama funds this work to make sure that folks are able to work with law enforcement agencies. We provide training to law enforcement in Birmingham, Bessemer, Homewood, and the sheriff's departments in Jefferson and Shelby County. This is important work so that our community feels safe. We also partner with government agencies and lead the Coalition for Language Access. Importantly, we also do work around human trafficking. As you may know, we live on the I-20 corridor. And so one of our team members actually was just recognized by the Department of Justice and the Attorney General's office for her work in being an advocate for victims of crime, especially in particular domestic violence. We take great pride in this work, and she sits every day at one place in Birmingham. We're able to now expand our reach. We have our central office in Homewood, but we have a satellite office in Birmingham. We have another one in Shelby County, and we also now have one in Tuscaloosa. So we're growing our capacity to serve more and more people. Our second program is our Citizenship and Immigration Program, which provides legal immigration services, high quality, low cost. We work hard to naturalize as many people as we can. Every year we file about 50 to 60 of them. But this year we did something different. We received a grant from USCIS to teach ESL for the purposes of naturalization. So we're teaching civics classes in English so that folks can pass that test, so they don't feel nervous, that they don't feel hesitant to take that test. We do about 50 a year. It's August, we've already done 75 because those classes filled up quick. And we're excited that we just launched our 3rd cohort. And we're excited about our capacity to include more members into our community. We also support DACA renewals and provide humanitarian visas to survivors and their families. You all may not know this, but if you're undocumented and you've been a victim of a crime and you cooperate with law enforcement, there's a pathway. It's called a humanitarian visa, but it takes 10 to 12 years to complete. So these are real barriers that exist. This is a ceremony we did with the city of Birmingham. During COVID, you would typically have celebrations of naturalization at the offices of USCIS, but because of COVID, they shut those down. So we started partnering with municipalities to welcome and invite families to celebrate their newly minted citizens. And that's been a fantastic opportunity. We did that in Birmingham. We're doing another one on September 2nd in the city of Homewood. If anyone wants to come, let me know. It's nothing more powerful than seeing someone embrace becoming an American. It's beautiful, it's impactful. I encourage you all, if you've never been, to go to a naturalization ceremony if you can. Our 3rd program is empowering communities, and that's where historically we've housed our civic engagement work. So we helped you become a citizen, which, by the way, if you go to a lawyer, will charge you $20,000, he could charge us $100. But if you become a citizen, we want you to be engaged in community. We want you to vote. We want you to know who is representing you, what issues matter to you. So we provide resources for that. But that program, when we had a young organizer said, but what we really need is access to college. Our young people don't know how to go to college. So we created a college access program that's called Escalera, the stairway. And so we've been doing that now for several years. And then we decided we also need workforce. We have a workforce crisis in this state, our country really. And so we've now partnered with Alabama Power, with Honda and others to create pathways for our community to find good paying careers. Now, let me put an emphasis on that first part, good paying careers. You may have jobs, but I want the jobs that pay well. And those are the ones that we want to put our community and make sure they have access to those. We also make sure that we counted folks in the 2020 census. So I like to take credit for the fact that we kept all 7 of our representatives because we counted all those Hispanics and there are now 5.3% of the population. This is an example of what we're doing in workforce. We partner with Aleman Power and Bevel State for their HVAC program. This young man came to us and he was looking for a career. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know if he was wanting to go to college even. We enrolled him in a 14-week program. And now he has a job making over $50,000 in HVAC. That's the kind of transformation that we're talking about. Our 4th program is what we call community economic development. We are a VITA site. That means we do tax prep for free. So we help about 300 folks pay their taxes, whether they're undocumented or documented. There's a misconception that undocumented immigrants do not pay taxes. But what we know is that if the federal government ever gets its act together and creates a pathway for citizenship, people are going to have to demonstrate that they've been paying taxes. So we encourage folks to pay taxes. We also encourage them to get what is called an individual tax ID number. So you may not have a social, but not surprisingly, Uncle Sam doesn't actually care if you're undocumented or documented. They still want your taxes. We also have a housing counseling program. We have the only bilingual HUD certified housing counselor in the state. And so in the last 2 years, we've helped about 15 people become first-time homeowners. And we also do tenant advocacy. We also, and I say this a lot, we also have a small business development program. Since 2013, we've helped over 200 folks open their businesses. And that's been really impactful. They're creating jobs, they're contributing to our community, they're contributing to our economy. But what we saw was that they couldn't grow because they couldn't go to access traditional financial institutions. So we started a loan fund. In 2019, we took $35,000 out of our own operating and applied for a small seed grant from the Community Foundation for about $50,000. And we started doing micro loans to small entrepreneurs, real small, $1,200, $3,600. Mostly because we didn't know what we were doing and we wanted to make sure that we wouldn't lose all our money at once. Y'all, that program has proved to be tremendously successful. Over $500,000 now deployed across 58 loans since 2019. 0 defaults. And I think that we take a lot of pride in that because that's what happens when you walk with your community, when you work with them. And we're talking about, these are all immigrant, predominantly women, entrepreneurs. So last week, we closed on our largest loan yet, $120,000 to Valladores and Palisades. So go get some tacos in Homewood and make sure that we get that money paid back. We'd really appreciate it. My vision, though, is to put a taco truck on every corner in Alabama. So let's make that a reality. That program continues to grow. And so we received a grant from the Department of Treasury, a CDFI TA grant. And so that now has put us on pace that we'll be applying for CDFI certification and that entity will become a financial institution so we can do more lending. What's next there? We're going to start a consumer lending project so that we can make sure that if someone wants to apply for nationalization and that costs about $1,000 through the government, that's not a barrier, that we can provide a no interest loan so they can achieve that dream. We're trying to figure out better and bigger ways to create impact in our community. This is a picture of just the picture we closed last week, $120,000. It's incredible that HICA can provide loans of this magnitude to folks who wouldn't otherwise be able to receive them. So we're really proud of that. These are character-based loans. We don't look at credit score. It says it right in our policy. So this is what makes us different because we're not in it for the profit. We're in it for the impact, for the transformation, for the empowerment, to provide opportunities for people who otherwise would not receive them. So be clear though, we do very careful underwriting. We ask to look at their books. We ask to talk to their family and friends to make sure that they have the support and capacity to do this. But we're finding more and more folks who are able to do so and creating opportunities through financial capability programs and education so they know what it takes. We see our work as functioning in a continuum. If you think about the first 2 programs, Strong Families and Citizenship and Immigration, as programs that create stability. We want to make sure folks are stable, that they're okay, that they have their basic needs met. But after that, we want to make sure that then they can realize all their dreams, all their aspirations. And so we want to put them on pathways for college and university, We want to put them on pathways for careers and jobs. We want them to be able to open their businesses. We want them to be able to purchase homes because we're in the business of creating generational wealth for families that have been denied it. And that's going to create real transformation for our communities so that when our children grow up, they know what home ownership looks like. When our children grow up, they know what entrepreneurship looks like. They know what college looks like. And that's going to change what and how Latinos operate in Alabama. Of course, like you all, during the pandemic, we all had to pivot and broaden and do different things. So the silver lining, of course, is that we got really good at providing virtual services. The work did not stop. We did a tax prep. We started doing curbside. People were pulling up to the building, and our team with umbrellas and caps, depending on how hot it was or how cold it was able to continue doing the work. We partnered with the food bank to provide boxes. We partnered with the health clinics to do vaccinations and testing. We found creative and new ways to continue working with the community. And we also wanted to make sure that they weren't going to be evicted from their housing. So we did about $400,000 in utilities and rental assistance. But we did that because we had your support as well, and that we were able to provide those sorts of resources. All right, so how do you work with Latinos if you're interested? And I know many of you are because y'all call me a lot. So, build trust, right? Especially around language. Avoid assumptions. Translate materials. Y'all want to reach Hispanics? Have something in Spanish, right? Now, I'll tell you this, I don't translate, so please don't call me asking me to translate anything. But I will refer you to a professional who you can pay to translate all the materials you need. Work with interpreters, explain and affirm confidentiality, and demonstrate empathy. These are the challenges of working with folks who are undocumented. There's a fear of the system, of law enforcement. The biggest barrier we see is someone's been a victim of a crime. They don't want to call the cops because they're scared they're going to get deported, even though they're the victim. They also have increased occupational risk, exposure to harm, climate change. If someone works at a construction site and they break their leg, they don't have insurance. They don't have unemployment. They don't have workman's comp. And so the safety net is denied. They don't have health care. They don't have unemployment. There were no stimulus checks for our community. So that makes all these things much more difficult. And they are also unable to receive a driver's license, which means that their everyday activity in Alabama is criminalized because there's no Alabama without a car. Having said all that, we want to partner with you. If you want to partner with me or anyone on my team, please reach out. And that's my presentation for today. Thank you so much for having me. We have plenty of time for questions. Also, I just wanted to take a quick shout out. We're working with PARCA. We're going to release a dashboard, HICA is soon, to talk about Hispanics across the state in terms of housing, workforce, education, and bankability. Like, one of the things that we discovered in reviewing this data, for example, is that 40% of Hispanics are unbanked. That means they don't have a checking account. That means that there's incredible barriers, but incredible opportunity to go and work with this community. Okay, having said that, any questions? Victor.
What do you say when friends, family, contacts, maybe business associates want to move to have the caliber of coming? What do you see in the pathway?
Thank you for asking a question. I think that he asked, what do we see when folks, families, friends want to come to the United States, and what are the challenges they're having in being able to migrate? I think what we hear often from the broader community is like, well, why don't they just get in line? Why don't they just do it the right way? Well, the fact of the matter is that we've restricted and narrowed the legal pathways for immigration for the last 30 years. And so it becomes increasingly difficult for folks to wait in line. Right now, if you want to come to the United States from Mexico with a visa, it's a 20-year wait. That's how long the line is. If you want to come on a student visa, you have to demonstrate all sorts of things. If you want to get an H-1B visa, incredible documentation that you have to provide. And we're denying them at higher and higher rates while we have a workforce crisis. And so what we're seeing is that it's become increasingly difficult for folks who want to come through the official pathways, but are unable to because we have reduced them or eliminated them altogether. And so what I would argue is that the immigrant crisis is also manufactured by the fact that we have reduced the pathways to legal immigration.
Carlos,
John.
first, thanks for sharing this with us. Very impressive presentation, and your passion for your job and your community is palpable and infectious. And I didn't know you were sitting out front. The question is this: you mentioned the folks who are living in the shadows and they're afraid to come forward as victims of crime. Is that problem? Is it getting any better? And how do you address that?
Yeah, and I think we have a great team in our Strong Families program that works closely with communities and really, to the credit of the police departments and law enforcement agencies, work with us directly. We also, you wouldn't think that HICA has a relationship with the Department of Homeland Security. We work with Homeland Security investigations around human trafficking. So we actually received an award for our work with that as well. And so we take pains to make sure that if a law enforcement officer comes to our office and they're willing to come and take reports there, that they understand that this person may or may not be in the country with documentation. But what matters in that moment is that they receive support as a victim of crime. And we talk to our community as to why they should do it at our office if they feel uncomfortable, but that we need to report crimes, that we need to work to make all of our communities safer. I think we have to remember that immigrants and Latinos want what everyone else wants: safe communities, good schools, good jobs, opportunities for improvement. That's what everyone wants, and that's why they come. Yes, sir.
Great program. I'm so glad HICA's in Birmingham. And you talked about the 2.6 million Hispanics in Alabama. How do you make contact with Hispanics that are not in Birmingham? Do they come to you or do you go to them?
Well, we have seen folks who come to us from across the state, from Huntsville to Mobile, from Tuscaloosa to Auburn. People drive to our office in Homewood and Birmingham. We're trying to figure out what that looks like, but we're also increasingly able to provide virtual services. And so, for example, the naturalization program, the ESL classes, we're doing that virtually now, or hybrid. And, we had this family drive from Mississippi to receive our services. And we told them, we could probably refer you to an organization there. And like, no. My cousin told me to come here. My cousin told me to come here. Like, you need to do this for me. And I'm like, yes, ma'am. And so we take that responsibility seriously. And so we also, during the pandemic, look, and I know we live in challenging times, but we are in the office because we're in the business of serving people. And people come to us and rely on us and expect us to be there. That's challenging sometimes, but it's what's necessary. So we do what needs to be done. And so we try our best to reach more people and create awareness. We partner with organizations across the state to make sure that folks know that we exist. But you'd be surprised, people still sometimes don't even know that we exist. And it's something that we talk about frequently to expand upon.
Thanks very much. You mentioned the presentation HB 56 from years ago, and then Florida just pretty recently passed a very restrictive immigration law. But I want to ask you about the flip side. Are there other states that you see that have adopted legislative or legal strategies that have been more open that you think that Alabama should look at while we're working on a federal solution?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky question because immigration is a federal issue for the most part. I think that we should stick to that because when the states get involved, it all kind of gets a little sticky and complicated. Having said that, though, I think that there's different things we can do. There's certain states that have provided driver's licenses to immigrants, undocumented immigrants as well. I think we need to think about it as a public safety issue. We need to know who people are. Right, but we also need to make sure that they're able to get insurance. So that makes all of us safer. It does not make us safer to deny people driver's licenses. It actually makes it more dangerous for all of us. And so I think that there's opportunities there. Health insurance, it does not make us safer to deny immigrants health insurance. It actually costs us more money to force people to use emergency rooms. And that's what we see. Or they continue going around not getting the help that they need and then getting other folks sick. So we want a healthier, safer community. We need to create pathways. And there are some states and programs that are trying to do this. Some in the Midwest, and some on the coast where you see historical immigrant populations. Thank you. Chuck.
Carlos, thanks for the presentation. I'm curious about your experience as an elected official, how that has maybe shaped or changed your perspective of your job, and vice versa, how your job maybe changed your perspective of how you communicate with everyone.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, Homewood has the largest city council in the state. Right, we have 11 folks. We can't do anything unless 6 people agree. And so I think that creates a lot of opportunities for conversation to make sure that if there's something you really care about, you have to build bridges and coalitions. You know, I think that really shapes how we look at our work at HICA, but that derived already from HICA. HICA can't exist if we don't have partners. Right? If we don't have community members or corporations, organizations, other people who say, hey, I care about what you're doing. We want to work with you. And so that means that I also have to communicate a message as to what is mutually beneficial here for all of us. And that requires a lot of patience sometimes, but also it creates and brings forth a lot of fruit when it works out. I mean, I think that we worked right now most recently with Honda, and they have been incredible partners because they want to create pathways for workforce. And that's opening all sorts of doors that didn't previously exist. City Council also has allowed me to bring a perspective that wasn't present there. You know, we worked on a language access plan for the city of Homewood. And that was really important. So now the public libraries and the parks are going to have signage in Spanish for the families that are in Homewood. I think that's really important. And so those sorts of things that inform my work in the different capacities make us, I think, a better community and make me a better leader.
The work we do with the cleanup funds is really impressive. What are some of the supports that you give entrepreneurs that are coming through that fund program, and how can the business support community get more engaged?
Jordan, you want to answer that question real quick? That's fine. So what are the supports we have? We provide financial capability program. We have a curriculum, right, that is tailored. So I think that that's also something that's important to take into account. Look, a lot of folks come to us quite a bit and say, hey, we want to serve Hispanics. And I'm like, but do you have anything in Spanish? Do you have anything that's tailored to work with an immigrant population? So what HICA provides is culturally relevant resources and materials so that we understand the challenges. Credit systems operate completely different in Latin America than they do here. So we have to provide those resources. We have to contextualize what the economic system looks like, why a home mortgage of 30 years is normal. That's strange to people. It's actually strange if you think about it, that we all signed up for a 30-year loan, but it's normal. It's how the system operates. So we provide that kind of education and also a kind of coach mentality, right? We work with folks directly. Is Deanna here? No. Diana, Gloria, Melissa, Joanna, Adriana, the folks who work on our team, make sure that they're not only seeing these community members as clients, but as partners, right? In something that we're trying to achieve. But Gloria, to be honest, will be the best person. So reach out to her after the presentation today. Allison.
Describe the need for safe affordable housing and that stabilizing factor that is safe affordable housing and second, for a lot of these new businesses, how do you find out who they are?
It's great. I'll answer the second question first because it's easier. We now have a guide of all the businesses that we work with, right, in terms of the loans, and so I can share that, and it's on the website. Thank you, Carla. It's on our website. You can see a list of a lot of the Latino-owned businesses. And we're working with folks to make sure that we can create more exposure and so they can have more clients. In terms of affordable housing, it's a crisis, as you all know, in our community, but also across the country. There's not enough quality, safe, affordable housing. And I think that, you know, look, I live in an affluent community in Homewood, and it's a real challenge because we all want our values to appreciate. But at what cost, right? Because one of the things that makes Homewood special is the fact that a lot of folks live in our apartment communities and then give us one of the most diverse student school systems in the area. So we have to figure out how to balance what we say we want and how to achieve it. And we need to create opportunities for home ownership because, as we know, historically in this country, that is the best vehicle for the generation of wealth. I thought I saw a question over there and then back to Victor.
Thank you for your presentation. I understand that your focus is on Hispanics. The programs do also other kind of non-Hispanics that ever served in some way the non-Hispanics and workforce development or immigration programs or.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, and so we are very proud that, you know, we're proud of who we serve and the community that we serve, but anyone who comes through our doors looking for our services, we will serve. For example, in our legal immigration services program, we have served people from 45 different countries. Only 24 of them are in Latin America, right? And so I think we have increasingly been able to increase our capacity to serve broader communities. We take the mission to serve all immigrant communities seriously. And also, we're looking for ways to increase that also through our entrepreneurial and workforce programs. We, in our building, house Inspiritus, another local nonprofit, rent space from us. And so we are now able to bring together communities from Africa, Asia, the Ukraine, and others, along with the predominantly Latino community that we serve. One last question, according to JW. Victor.
Did you notice any unique challenges with the move to virtual and remote work, or is it
Absolutely. Digital literacy is a real issue, right? And so I think that one of the things that we had to contend with is that while everyone has a mobile phone, we don't all use them the same. So the importance of recognizing that in our community, the best communication tool is WhatsApp, right? Not email. People do not want to sign up for email. They don't want to read those things. They don't click on them. We say, hey, we sent you this thing. I'm like, I haven't seen it. And so working with community members to make sure that there's a broad array of tools that are available to them, and us also meeting them where they are. Our community is not on LinkedIn. They're on Facebook. They're still on Facebook. And so we do quite a bit of communication through our Facebook pages, through our WhatsApp. And to be honest, a lot of what we do is word of mouth, right? Like someone gets great services from us and says, hey, you can go get help there. So those are the ways we mostly communicate, but there are challenges as we transition to virtual during the pandemic. For a lot of us, the pandemic was brutal, but we're here.
Thank you, Carlos.
All right.
Thank you, Carlos, for taking time to join us today. In appreciation of your time, we would make a donation in your honor to Woodlawn United. There are a lot of great takeaways, but it's really important for me it's important to me that you know that Carlos is really not that funny. Today is an anomaly. That's my major takeaway. But as a reminder, we are not meeting next week, but we hope you will support our club's signature event, the Birmingham Business Hall of Fame, on Thursday, August 24th. Please make sure you register, and if register you and your guests to attend, make sure you get your tickets today. Have a great week. The meeting is adjourned.